You can now get a 30-day trial to experience The Athletic for free. Visit the link in the description below to try it now.
Hello and welcome to Tifo IRL. I'm Alex, an analyst at Tifo. Today we're going to be talking about Real Madrid's weird expected goals. Okay, Real Madrid. This is their first choice lineup probably at the moment. What's really interesting about this is that Real Madrid have had some defensive issues, and we're going to talk about those in another video, go into them specifically. But the reason they've mattered less in La Liga this season is that Real Madrid have been scoring a hatful of goals. However, their expected goals is actually quite low. So in Europe's top 5 leagues, this is with between 12 and 14 games played, Real Madrid's XG is the 14th lowest of any side. That's not too bad, I suppose, but what's really interesting is that no side in Europe's top 5 leagues has exceeded their expected goals by the same degree in relation to the goals they've scored. So they've actually scored 9.3 goals more than their expected goals would suggest. That's a serious gulf, second, by the way, are Hellas Verona with 9.1 for you fact fans. So why does this happen? Let's just have a quick look at XG and remind everybody what we're talking about here. So expected goals is basically a measure of probability that determines how likely a shot is to be scored from a given location. XG models, and we're using FB Refs here, which is powered by StatsBomb, take into account different kinds of things. So some of those things are the position of the goalkeeper, the position of defenders, the type of pass that's being received, so whether it's like a cross or a pullback or a pass along the ground from deep, and also things like the location and body part of the shot. So is it a header from the 6-yard box? Is it a side foot from on the goal line? That kind of stuff. So that's a brief reminder of XG. So what teams want to be doing really is, no, let's move that here. Really what they want to be doing is shooting in this sort of area. That's the part of the pitch where you're most likely to get a high XG. Obviously, the further you move out to the sides here, the lower the XG is. The further away from the goal, the lower the XG is. And if it's a header, it's going to have a lower XG than a shot with the foot, because headers are harder to score. So, how are Real Madrid massively exceeding their XG? Well, the first thing to note is that a couple of their players, and we're going to highlight here Vinicius Jr. and Karim Benzema, are on really, really hot streaks. And there are sometimes footballers who score more goals than their expected goals would suggest, simply because they're really good finishers. Benzema we know is a world-class striker. Vinicius Jr. has really hit form this season. But there are a couple of really interesting things that Real Madrid do tactically, which would suggest why the sorts of opportunities they're getting require this high degree of technical skill, and that's how they manage to exceed their XG by so much. So what do teams do against Real Madrid? Well, let's get rid of these lines because they're mildly confusing. Teams like to sit deep, right? Real Madrid are the kind of team who like to build possession out from the back slowly. They are trying to work the ball through the lines, and what that means is that teams in La Liga tend to sit off against them. And that's the first thing to say, is that when Real Madrid create chances in the penalty area, so let's start moving these players up here like this, generally speaking, they're against packed defenses who are sitting deep. And that makes it very, very hard for Real to create chances in this sort of area without defenders in the way. And that obviously is lowering the expected goals opportunity for them. So even if Junior, say, gets down this side here and creates a clever pullback here for Benzema, these defenders are going to be here because they're already sitting deep. And Real Madrid have to really contend with the fact that most teams in La Liga will sit off against them. They won't try and press them unless it's in this part of the pitch. They'll try very hard to be compact, to be difficult to play through, because players like Toni Kroos and Luka Modric are really good at picking those passes. And straight away, that's removing XG total from Real. But there's another thing they do that's really interesting. One of the ways that they've really started to attack effectively this season is through the flanks. And this is partly because Vinicius Jr. is having such a good season, but it's also because of the role that Benzema plays. So if we have the sort of classic Real build-up situation here. Let's move some of these guys out of the way. What'll happen is as they start to progress the ball through the lines like this, Benzema is going to drop off and he becomes the focal point. And then Asensio here on the right and Vinicius Jr. here on the left, they're going to target these sorts of runs here like this. And what that means is that when they get the ball, because Benzema is then able to pick those passes, oh, there's one there, so Junior's in here, straight away, he is at an angle here. So the goalkeeper can come forwards here, and although there is like an angle of shooting opportunity, like that, let's get rid of that line because it's confusing, straight away that's a lower XG chance than if he was being played through the centre. Now, I know that sounds like a statement of the obvious, but what's really interesting here is how many of Real Madrid's goals are scored in this manner. It's either Benzema dropping off and playing one of these runners in like this, or it's Benzema dropping off, playing one of the runners in, who then goes across to the byline, Benzema or somebody else continues that run in, and then there's a pullback. But these defenders will follow in here and start to crowd him out. Now, both of those types of opportunity suggest low XG chances. Because Real Madrid are getting their attacking players making these out to in runs, they're finding themselves in the parts of the penalty area that automatically create lower XG chances. But they seem to have players who are, and this is Vinicius Jr. particularly here, but Benzema's really good at it too, Asensio's really good at it too. They've got players who are really good at finding the opposite bottom corner. So this shooting technique that they have, where they're pulling the ball across and trying to curl it round, or stopping, cutting inside onto their stronger foot and then hitting it around, that naturally facilitates scoring from those kinds of chances that they are actively trying to create. This is because they're particularly strong down the wings. It's because they also want to keep the centre relatively compact. And so a lot of these shooting opportunities are coming from passes that then find players in this sort of wide area for those pullbacks or for those shooting chances. What that means is that Real's natural attacking gameplay is putting their shooters into positions where the XG is lower, but because the shooters are really good at finishing, they're still scoring goals from them. There's one other thing that's worth noting here, and that is that because of Real's slight problems with defence, teams will push against them quite aggressively in their own defensive third. And they tend to have this issue where sometimes the midfield here gets a bit separated from the defensive line. But what that does is it creates depth that Real Madrid can push into in the attacking area. So what I mean by this is, if these players are up here like this, Benzema is going to find some space because all of these guys are here. Let's say the ball is with Alaba. They're starting to create a press up here. And what happens then, if Alaba can get the ball back to Courtois and bosh it forwards here, then Benzema suddenly is in an awful lot of space. Now, it's very likely that there will be a couple of defenders with him. But here, in this instance, either he can then create the sort of chance that we've been talking about, or he can do it all on his own. But as these defenders fall back, he's using his trickery, he's holding the ball up because he's not the fastest. And then, because he's such a good finisher, he's still able to, that's not an arrow, he's still able to get a shot in. Again, that spacing, that kind of counter-attack situation will often create low XG chances because the defenders have sat back and obviously the goalkeeper's in a position and can get themselves set. But again, because Benzema is in a hot streak of finishing and because Vinicius Jr. is likewise, Real Madrid is still able to score from these situations. So just to recap then, basically this is a systemic thing because Real Madrid are looking to attack through the wings, they're looking to leverage this partnership that's developed between their centre forward and their two wide players. That automatically creates chances that are from the wide areas. Those chances are harder to score than something centrally, and Madrid don't get many central chances, but because they have such good finishers, it doesn't matter. Now, overall, does it matter? Yes, possibly, because this sort of finishing streak is unlikely to continue to this degree. We talk in data about reversion to the mean, and what that means is that if your expected goals is way, way, way behind the number of goals you're scoring, it's likely that the number of goals you're scoring will regress, i.e. go backwards, to meet that expected goals target at some point. Now, as I said, in Europe's top 5 leagues, we've played between 12 and 14 games in the season now, and we will start probably to see some sort of regression or reversion to the mean by Real Madrid. The issue that they have is because defensively there are some issues. They need to keep scoring goals at this rate in order to keep winning games and stay top of La Liga. So it may be worth addressing how they create their chances to ensure that they don't have to rely on streaks of finishing like they've currently got. So that's been Tifo RL. Thanks very much for joining us. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll be back with lots more content, including that Real Madrid defensive video I talked about very soon.
Buy holiday much, buy and gift how much, buy it now to avoid disappointment because of delivery times. Yes, that's right. Use the offer code TIFOBF to get £10 off when you spend £60, and buy it now to avoid holiday disappointment at shop.tifofootball.com.